So, today I'm going to talk about the Frank Miller classic that has caused a bunch of controversy over the years. I'm of course talking about the kick-ass, grim and gritty, misogyny-filled masterpiece that is Frank Miller's Sin City. But before I get into it, I do want to mention that I have a Patreon, so if you want to support me, you could jump over there. You don't have to, but it would be greatly appreciated. So, Sin City isn't just one story that Frank Miller wrote. Sin City is a world that he created. And although all of the comic entries in the world might not be amazing, some of them are absolute 10 out of 10s. Personally, I have to get around to the ones that I haven't read yet, but the ones that I have read have been just amazing. As the debut for Sin City, you had the first story being The Hard Goodbye, starring the character of Marv, who was immediately recognizable and iconic just by his silhouette. And this is something that Frank Miller does with almost every single one of his characters. Going throughout the rest of the Sin City series, he also has other amazing characters that you can just tell who they are from their silhouette alone. It's the same with his Daredevil or his Batman. Frank Miller created the quintessential look for the hero, something that Todd McFarlane and all other artists would copy. The wide eyes and the badass brooding hero. Frank Miller created it, and it wasn't edgy or cringe, it just came across as natural. Now, I've read The Hard Goodbye over and over, and it is one of my favourite comics out there. The art is absolutely insane, the writing is top notch, and when reading Sin City you just can't be bored. Even when there's big blocks of text, it's like reading a classic Noir pulp. And unlike an Alan Moore or a Grant Morrison comic, Sin City is not afraid to show you what a real comic book is. Tough, masculine heroes, and the women are feminine and drawn in a way that has offended lots of people, which we will get to. But to be honest, that's the way they should be drawn in comic books. We don't read comic books to see realistic versions of what people are actually like. Nobody wants that. Want to see the cool guy with the big gun get the girl and kill the bad guy. That's the formula for success, and it works every single time. And it's not just in comic books where that formula applies. When comics are adapted, it's a massive success on the screen as well, which we will get to a second also. But after rereading the story starring the awesome hard-boiled detective John Hartigan, entitled The Yellow Bastard, basically, I think that this one somehow tops it. And The Hard Goodbye is a masterpiece, so that's really saying something. As I mentioned a second ago, I read these two comics, and for a long time I thought that, yeah, this one was good, but The Hard Goodbye was way better. But upon second glance, I've realised that this one, I think, is better. Where The Hard Goodbye had the hero in Marv, this kind of morally grey criminal, this story has John Hartigan, a tough-as-nails cop who is an all-out hero. Where you could question some of the things that Marv does, John Hartigan operates off of a different moral code, one that from the first chapter immediately is on display. That this guy is an old school pulp detective hero. Speaking about the first chapter, what a chapter it is. It starts off like an 80s action movie where the grizzled veteran cop, it's his last day on the job, and instead of relaxing, he goes in to save the girl from the evil scumbag. And all throughout the story we get some awesome moments where Hartigan, like Dirty Harry, wielding a goddamn magnum, is dropping these scumbags and saying some of the most badass dialogue you've ever even heard. People attack me all the time in the comment section saying, well, it doesn't matter if it was badass, Daredevil's badass. What about good writing and character building? Yeah, I might not mention it, but Frank Miller is a master at that as well. It just so happens that his stories are also extremely badass. Frank Miller deeply understands character building and how to tell a story and the emotions of his characters. It's not just badass, edgy dialogue like a new comic. I'm not naming names, but we know the ones I'm talking about. It never comes across as cringe or forced when John Hartigan lifts up that cannon and says, "Sure I can," and blows some dude's head off. You're never reading it and going, okay, the dude writing this is some scrawny twerp who sips soy lattes and tweets about BLM. How can I believe that your character is badass? I know Frank Miller himself isn't exactly Dirty Harry, but you can tell the guy isn't some weak communist. Speaking of weak communists, let's jump over to what I was talking about with all that controversy. So this article here, Problematic Faves, Sin City. Already it's annoying me. Problematic faves. So you're not allowed to actually like something. It can't be one of your favorite things because it's problematic. Okay, let's just get into this absolute schlock. All it takes is a few flicks down and you see that I love it even more than I love graphic novels, and boy, that can be a difficult task when you're trying to be a good feminist. I don't even think I have to comment on that. Trying to be a good feminist. Anybody who even talks about being a feminist should be locked up on the spot, as we know with Neil Gaiman. So, you go down. Frank Miller is one of the true undeniable icons of modern comic book fiction. His gritty, old-school, pulp-inspired storytelling helped to drag the medium into the modern day, with bleak, unabashedly political and abrasive tales. Well, unabashedly political, you might be talking about The Dark Knight Returns or something. But Daredevil is a straight-up superhero story. It never puts politics, left or right, in your face. So you might need to go back and read some comics before you start talking about them. So as you go down, you get hit with the obligatory tripe of over-sexualizing characters and objectifying women and misogyny. And I didn't even know this was a thing, but apparently Alan Moore famously called out Miller's bigotry, describing Sin City as unreconstructed misogyny. Alan Moore, little tip for you, buddy. When you're constructing sentences, you're supposed to say words that make sense. What the hell is unreconstructed misogyny? Are you just making up words now? You're just making up phrases. What does that even mean? Let's type it into Google. I didn't even plan this, but I'm just going to do it for the video anyway. Okay, unreconstructed, not reconciled or converted to the current political theory or movement. Still, it makes no sense. Alan Moore is talking crap out of his ass 24/7. Stop putting him in your articles, stop quoting him, stop reading his comics. I don't care about his Swamp Thing run. The dude is an idiot. All you have to do is type Sin City into Reddit, which is the forbidden place that nobody should go. But if you actually come over here, you see that is Sin City supposed to be ironic? I hear everybody praise it so much, and when I checked it out, I found myself utterly confused. It felt like a comic written by your uncle that won't shut up about Fox News. What does that mean? Your uncle that won't shut up about Fox News is either some stupid boomer who doesn't know what he's talking about, or he's somebody who actually knows what's going on in the world. So if your uncle was watching CNN and talking about it, you'd be perfectly fine with it. But Fox News, the most milquetoast political takes, you somehow have a problem with. It's like being a conspiracy theorist. You're utterly insane. So you can already tell that whoever's writing this, the weak guy, is a moron. But you come down and you have a great comment with 167 upvotes. It's not ironic. Sin City is Frank Miller riffing on the crime genre he loves, and Mickey Spillane in particular. We see that especially in the names of the stories. The Hard Goodbye is an obvious tribute to The Long Goodbye by Raymond Chandler. You also have The Big Fat Kill, which at first sounds stupid, a title for a Noir story, but really it's a tribute to the Mickey Spillane Mike Hammer novel The Big Kill. The dude goes on saying it's basically Noir done in the style of a superhero comic. Several times Marv's trench coat looks like it's almost a cape. That's not an accident. Once again, that's one of the great things about reading a Frank Miller comic. Daredevil might be wearing red spandex, but at his heart, he's basically a detective. Noir, by its nature, tends to be trashier, explicitly sexual, and violent. It revels in the darker human impulses on the spectrum: lust, murder, greed, and revenge. Now that might be a little skewed, because a lot of people misunderstand what Noir actually is. It's not sick and perverted people in a sick, dark world. It's a grim and gritty world filled with dark people and dark things, but then there's a hero in the middle of it. Yeah, he might not be the best guy, but he is a hero. Not an anti-hero, not a morally grey guy, no, he's the hero. Another horribly misunderstood archetype, the femme fatale, as in the woman so irresistible and powerful, she will be the death of you. She was created in the Noir genre. Yes, that's correct. And that term is just thrown around all the time. Like Catwoman from Batman, who's a femme fatale, and every single female character is a femme fatale. A real femme fatale is something you see in a Raymond Chandler story. A woman that is irresistible, not powerful as this guy mentioned. They're never powerful. It's more like irresistible and innocent until the time actually comes, and they're not that at all. Just see Double Indemnity for what I'm talking about. Barbara Stanwyck in that film isn't some powerful woman. At the same time, she turns out to be not really a great person. That is the femme fatale on full display right there, and Frank Miller gets that archetype more than anybody else. You can complain all you want about how he draws curvy women and how he treats them in the stories and how there's homophobic slurs in Sin City. It doesn't matter. The dude understands the genre and the archetypes and the character traits perfectly. Guy goes on saying there are better examples examples of the genre than Frank Miller, no question. However, he's not doing it wrong. It may not be your thing, and that's okay. Now, I haven't checked out every single aspect of Noir comics, so yeah, maybe the guy's right that Frank Miller doesn't understand it and it's probably not the best, but he is right on one thing when he says that it may not be your thing and that's okay. Basically roasting the original poster, saying that if you have a problem with it, if you think that it's ironic, you think that it's this, it might not be your thing. Maybe stick to Invincible or Superman or some goofy childish comic like that. This is a crime noir pulp influenced story and most people can't handle it. Speaking of which, you come over here to CBR with the article Sin City, 5 ways it's brilliant and 5 ways it does not hold up. Now this is a common title for articles and they're usually all terrible and written by some woke cock. But let's actually see what this retard is trying to say. So number 10, the brilliant reason is noir. And yeah, he's not wrong there. Sin City is noir. Every single page is dripping with noir visuals, dialogue, storytelling, classic tropes of the genre. I like how for the noir point, he shows Hartigan shooting the dude's hand off, which is pretty badass. But noir isn't all shooting people and action. It's more based in the dialogue and the storytelling and the world. But Sin City does have some damn good action, having people dual wielding guns like a John Woo movie. The next point does not hold up. Homophobia. Well, homophobia. I don't think Frank Miller is scared of gay people. I don't think Frank Miller or anybody is really scared of gay people. There's no phobia. It might just be a tiny little bit of disgust. So when toxic masculinity tends to be unavoidable tradition of noir stories, Sin City indulges in unapologetic homophobia. You're goddamn right. Nobody cares about homophobia. If you're reading a comic and you have a problem with homophobia, maybe you should put it down and go back to your boyfriend. Next point. Brilliant. The art. As I mentioned earlier, yeah, the art is some of the best ever done in the medium. Each page is glorious, and if the words weren't there, it would still be a masterpiece. The next point does not hold up. Depictions of women. I don't mean to be that guy, but they might be the best part of the story. The fact that Frank Miller willingly embraces his depictions of women on the page. He's not afraid to show you everything. I don't know, if you're used to Garth Ennis comics, you might like seeing naked dudes running around, but in a Frank Miller comic, it's the exact opposite. And once again, if you don't like it, maybe you shouldn't be reading it. Next point for what's brilliant, the intensity. Yeah, I agree here. The story is very visceral, and although it's black and white, it reaches levels of violence that are insane, but in a good way. Sin City, especially the story with Hartigan, builds up villains that are absolutely disgusting people that you really are rooting for to be taken down, and by God do they get taken down. You see that very clearly at the epic end of this story where Hartigan faces the villain once again. The same situation, 10 years have passed, and just like before, Hartigan puts him down and destroys him. Frank Miller understands that basic fact that there's bad people in the world and you can show how bad people are and how disgusting things can be, but you don't just show it to them and leave it sit with them. No, instead you show them that darkness and that grittiness and you come up with a solution to the problem. You create a hero that's there to stop it. That's the way most stories should be based, and when people forget to add in the hero, that's when things are usually wrong. Like with Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman, they show you horrible, disgusting things. They don't come up with a solution to it, they just show it to you, and those people usually turn out to be pretty horrible themselves. Does not hold up. Ableism. I don't really know what the guy's talking about. He mentions like one line about somebody who's retarded or mentally ill, so that's not really a point to be making. One mention of it does not mean that the story doesn't hold up. Next point as to why Sin City is brilliant. Prose. In the world of comics, it is generally accepted that writers handle the scripts while artists draw, ink and colour the comics. It's very rare that an artist can deliver a great piece of writing. Frank Miller is one of those rare artists who can also write. This ties back to one of my last videos I just made about Frank Miller. People disrespect either his writing or his art, and most people never realise that he's a master at both. The dude isn't a good writer who can't draw comics, and he's not a great artist who doesn't know how to write and plays into misogynistic tropes. He can write and draw comics better than most people on the planet. Sin City is one of the best examples of that. Frank Miller proving that he could write full-blown crime noir epics and also draw some of the best visuals, art, characters you've ever seen. Does not hold up. Racism. Now, I haven't read any stories with racism, and from this guy's description, it doesn't really really sound like it's racist either. And even if it was, grow a pair. Next, brilliant characters. I just said this previously. Ranting, Marv. These guys are some of the best heroes in comics. Yeah, they might be in a really grim world, and they might do stuff that's mean and nasty, but that's the world of Sin City, and in that world, they are heroes, showing strength and resilience in really tough situations, and fighting for what's morally right, sometimes ending in death. But that's the price that these heroes pay. We see that with the hard-hitting end quote of this story. An old man dies, a young woman lives. Fair trade. Ranting is not afraid to give his life for what's right. And then we get to the final point of what does not hold up. Dialogue. That is the thing that holds up the most. The dialogue of Sin City, as I said, never gets boring. When I read the comic The Walking Dead, I do like that comic. The story is good. The art is good. But one thing I realized over the years is that there's a lot of text, and a lot of it means nothing. Like, you don't even have to read half of it. Compared to Sin City, where every single sentence is memorable and fully noir. It's not this pseudo-noir where over and over it's dames, we gotta be smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey and looking out windows and dames. No, that's not noir. Frank Miller understands what's truly noir. You're in a dark world where the entire system is against you, yet you refuse to give up. And this comic understands that philosophy more than most. And when these epic tales finally get adapted to the screen with no holes barred, it's not like the X-Men movies or the Marvel movies where they do a race swap or they come in and change the story to be more accessible for the audience. When Robert Rodriguez brought in Frank Miller and adapted this story page for page, word for word, it worked out. Why? Because Sin City is one of the most beloved movies out there. It's probably in my top 5 comic book movies of all time. Even people who don't read comics couldn't deny that Sin City as a story was a masterpiece. That just shows you what happens when you actually adapt the comic, when you don't change anything, when you bring in exact shots that are done masterfully, then it's accepted as a great work. Because if the comic was successful and millions of people read it and love it, then if you adapt it to the screen and give the fans and the writer what they deserve, then the same thing is going to happen. You're going to be rewarded with a story that is excellent, no matter if it's on a page or on the screen. So forget what everybody says about Frank Miller being a misogynist, Islamophobic, homophobe. It's all bullcrap. Even if he is that, the dude is still a legend. And it's masterpieces like Sin City that prove that. So if you agreed with me, let me know. And if you got a goddamn problem, go complain to your boyfriend.
You can't even lift that cannon you're carrying.
Sure I can.